Hey everyone, I'm Antonia Lofaso. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm so excited for this cook along with y'all doing the Feast of Seven Fishes, which is my favorite holiday, Christmas Eve. It's an Italian-American tradition to have a bounty of seafood on that night. I've been cooking Feast of Seven Fish in my house for so many years, and I love this dish so much. It's caviar with a house-made potato chip with an herbed creme fraiche. I like to say when you are doing these kinds of cook-alongs or you're following a recipe, have all your ingredients out and have all your equipment out. So you're not trying to find, I don't know, a lemon juicer or a tablespoon or a bowl. We are gonna start by making our potato chips because those take the longest. So I've got some Kennebec potatoes here. Feel free to use a Yukon if you can't find a Kennebec. That being said, I think that Kennebecs are the best for making a homemade French fry from scratch and a homemade potato chip from scratch. The starch content is kind of perfect, so it cooks and browns evenly, like the best potato for it. Okay, so we've got 3 sort of medium-sized Kennebec potatoes. Potatoes can range to be sort of very small and very, very large. These are sort of medium, which is perfect. And I've got a Japanese mandoline, okay? Very, very different than a French mandoline. The French mandolins tend to be a little bit more expensive, and they are sort of bulky, metal, and I think a little bit harder to work with. I love the Japanese mandoline. They're easy to wash, they're easy to use, they're lightweight, and they're pretty inexpensive. So the way you sort of have the setting, okay, is there's a little knob on the back and I just kind of want to open it. So as I turn it counterclockwise, this top piece kind of presses down so the blade is shallow, so that'll give you the thickness. So the first couple of slices are going to be a throwaway because we're trying to get the right size. So before I can see that, we want to do about a 1/4 inch thick. We're going to throw away these little pieces. We don't need them. We're going to leave the skin on. Just wash them really, really well. Make sure there's no dirt. Obviously, potatoes grow on the ground, so there is dirt. You want to just give them a nice scrub. But the skin of the Kennebec potato is delicious and edible. Do not peel it. So you want to go ahead and cut these into a 1/4 inch rounds. And I have a bowl ready to go because we're just going to give these a little bit of a rinse. You want to really make sure that you are using the guard so that you protect your fingers because a mandolin cut are not fun. That said, if you're going rogue and you want to learn how to do it, go slow. The blade is very, very strong and very, very sharp. And I kind of just go with it. I go back and forth. I'm not scared of the mandolin. As I get closer, though, to the bottom, I will bend my fingers back as much as they possibly can. I flatten the palm of my hand to the mandolin, and I hold my fingers up high, almost like an airplane. Woo! So the higher that I do that, and then I slow down, the mandolin is not gonna be able to slice my hand if I'm going slowly and my hand's like this. It's the fingers that get in the way. And don't sacrifice a finger for this piece of potato. Just throw it away. And then if you see any pieces like this that come up, right, there's always sometimes a bruised, potato that happens. We just want to pull those pieces out. We don't want to use them. So just make sure you go through your pieces to make sure that they look and feel the way they're supposed to. Again, pulling away those first couple of pieces. We don't need those, but we'll take these. That's my discard pile. And 3 potatoes. I always like to say, listen, I'm a huge potato chip junkie. Love them, love them, love them. Think about this, right? Whenever you travel in Italy or if you're in a sort of a European style restaurant, as soon as you sit down and you're ordering a glass of Lambrusco or Prosecco or Aperol Spritz, the first thing they put in front of you are some crispy potato chips to eat. That's essentially where I got the inspiration to do this dish for the Feast of Seven Fishes, right? Okay, we don't need our mandolin anymore, we're done. I'm just gonna give these potato chips a quick rinse and then we're gonna start frying them in batches and then we will get on to making our herbed creme fraiche. So I filled the Kennebec potatoes with just a little bit of cold water from the sink, and I'm just gonna spread them out and open them up. Sometimes potatoes, when you slice them, they stick together, they don't wanna come apart. And what I'm trying to do is just release some of that natural starch from the potato. If there's too much of that starch on the potato when it goes into the fryer, they're gonna brown faster than they cook. Okay, this will also preserve. If you wanna keep them in water until you're ready to fry, you can do that. And again, this is something that you can do a couple of days in advance. I would say not more than 2 days in advance. Slice a whole bunch of potatoes, put them in cold water, throw them in your fridge, and then you've got perfect potatoes ready to fry on the day of. Okay, So I'm gonna go ahead and rinse this one more time. I rinsed it one more time and now we're ready to fry. You can actually see the water this time around is less starchy, right? I moved it around, a ton of that starch was released. Second time around, not so much starch. Got it all in the first time. So you can do this in batches. I go right from the water into the fryer, dipping it onto a towel so that it doesn't get any water into the fryer. Obviously we know this. Water and oil does not mix, so really be careful about putting any kind of water into the fryer. Now, these are in water, so as they touch oil, they will 100% start to spark a little bit. The oil will get a little testy and a little upset and a little aggressive because water wants nothing, or oil wants nothing to do with water. But don't worry about that, it'll dissipate. Just make sure that the majority of water has kind of been touched off. So we're just gonna start throwing these into the fryer. And I'm using a tabletop fryer and I don't have the baskets in it. I'm letting them just kind of free float in here. The baskets for me kind of just get in the way, especially with something like potato chips. We want to give the potato chips room to go into the fryer. I know it looks strange that I'm kind of doing this, right? I'm not just gonna throw them all in there. I'm doing like one at a time so that they don't stick to each other. Just kind of giving them their place inside of the oil. And we're gonna do this in 2 batches. So I'll leave that potato for the rest. So about 1.5 potatoes per batch. And then I take a slotted spoon and I just kind of gently move the potatoes around in the oil. You're gonna do this whether you're using a Dutch oven or the tabletop electric fryer like I have here. But I really like moving the chips around for a couple of different reasons, okay? They're gonna cook so much more evenly. If you just throw chips into a fryer and leave them alone, they tend to find each other, they come back together, they get stuck together, and there's not that beautiful golden brown that's perfect on both sides. You know, there's all of these little tricks that you can do to make the perfect potato chip, but it's really about taking the time in the operation to really make sure that the dish is perfect. You wanna have a sheet tray with a little bit of paper towel line to go, right? You need to make sure that you have the equipment standing by so that you can do it safely and that you can do it with ease, okay? And that's about being ready. So I'm gonna just cut some dill right here. And the dill is great just right out of the fridge, or if you want to stick it in some water to keep it fresh. I also like to put a paper towel over the top, and that really keeps the herbs nice and fresh. The dill stem, I think, is really nice and soft and totally usable in this kind of application. So I'm going to be a little more free-flowing when I pull the herb off its stem. Just by taking it like this and just kind of pulling it, and if there's a little bit of stem, that's fine, because dill stem, nothing wrong with it. Okay, so just pull, pull, pull. Leave that off to the side. So good. Throw these away. Keep those. Oh. Waste not, want not. Pull all those out. We don't need the stems. You are able to use the stems. So if anyone wants to make, I love chicken soup. And chicken soup with a little bit of dill stem really kind of gives you that sort of matzo ball, Jewish deli kind of flavor. So if you ever want to use dill stems to make a nice chicken noodle soup, that's always the move. All right. So I'm just going to ball my herbs up. We're going to run the knife through it, just like that. And this is going to be a nice rough chop, okay? We're not going to go crazy with it. We're not going to totally bruise the dill. I just want to bring the knife through. If there's little pieces of stem in there, that's okay. We're making potato chips, right? Nothing too fancy. I mean, it is a kind of a fancy potato chip, but we don't need to get fancy with pulling that stem off. The stem is totally usable. Here, give a little rinse to my hand. So another little trick that I find to be totally useful is that when you start to see the bubbles dissipate into the fryer, that's when you know the potato chips are almost ready. So when you put them first into the fryer, you're gonna see a ton of bubbles. The oil's like, I'm here, I'm frying you, I'm here, I'm frying you. And then as they start to really finish and get ready and get nice and crisp, the oil starts to bubble less. And that's just a fact. And when it starts to bubble less, you're like, okay, these are almost done frying. But you'll also feel the texture with the slotted spoon. As you're sort of throwing those potato chips back and forth in the oil with the slotted spoon, you'll start to feel them actually get crunchy as they hit the side of the fryer, or they hit your spoon, or they hit one another. You'll actually start to feel the texture of the potato change, which is kind of cool. All right, so I'm gonna leave that dill off to the side, just right on my cutting board. Let's start with the creme fraiche first. We're gonna take 2 cups of creme fraiche. Can you use sour cream? Absolutely. I'm using creme fraiche because it's traditional in using creme fraiche for any kind of caviar. It's a higher fat type of sour cream. So again, you wanna take the time out as you're cutting your herbs and making our creme fraiche, and we are just making sure that these chips are nice and ready to go, and we're gonna then fry one more batch. Okay, so creme fraiche into a bowl. We're going to zest lemon. Like, that's my motion for it. So you start on one side and you just kind of go up and down and you move through the lemon easily over and over again. And then we're gonna use this lemon for the lemon juice. So it's so great. So it's like no lemon left behind kind of a thing, because we have all this great lemon oil, right? All of the great oils that come off of the zest of the lemon are now gonna season the creme fraiche, then along with the juice. So I always like to say it's like 2 different kinds of lemon. It's a lemon duo. We will juice those 2 lemons into that creme fraiche. Oh, there's a little bit more. You always want to make sure the back of your rasper, so you get all that zest off. I can actually hear the chips stop, and you can see it, right? They're not making any more noise or any more movement into the fryer. They're like a perfect golden brown. I can feel the crispiness of them. You know that they're done. Pull it out. I kind of just give it a little touch with my finger. They're ready. Shake off any excess oil with your slotted spoon and just lay them out. Yep, they're not making any noise. They're not making any kind of bubbling or gurgling. I always like to say there's like the potato chip gurgle, and that's how you know that they are ready to go. And as soon as they're out onto this sheet tray with a little bit of paper towel, we're gonna season them really nicely with salt and a little bit of chopped dill. And then we will start on the second batch. So season generously, and you wanna make sure that you kind of move your fingers back and forth, and what that does is kind of break up the salt particles so that they can evenly fall and distribute over the top of the chips. And then you take your chopped dill and you just put that right over the chip. It's gonna clump every once in a while. Some will stick. That's okay. We just wanna get the essence of dill on those potato chips. It's taking so much out of me not to have a bite of chip yet. Okay, I need to wait till the dish is ready. Okay, chips are ready. Second batch of chips. Let's go. So again, just taking the chips out of the water. Try to give just a little pat onto your paper towel, and then just start throwing them back into the fryer, right? Individual. Have you ever seen so much care and love given to a potato chip, right? Every little chip is going through my fingers into the fryer. Make sure there's no excess water on your chips. If you feel it, just kind of give it another little pat so we can avoid putting too much water into the fryer or the Dutch oven, whatever it is that you want to use. And then even though I put every single chip in there personally, right? Every single chip went in there personally, I'm just gonna give it a little. I don't want them to stick together. I don't want them to party together. I want them to fry separately and do a perfect golden brown. Oh, one little rogue chip still left in the bowl, into the fryer. Okay, now we are ready to make our creme fraiche. We've got a cup of creme fraiche in there, high fat French sour cream. Now we're gonna squeeze some lemon juice into that creme fraiche, and then we're gonna finish it with just a little bit of chopped chives, and then we're gonna talk about caviar, and then we're gonna eat this thing. All right. So I always like to put my head away from a squeeze of lemon because, you know, a little lemon in the eye is never a good thing, never helpful. And there's so many different ways of squeezing lemon. You can kind of just do it with your hand. You can cut them into little segments and then just squeeze them. You know, there's the old school way where you cut it and just kind of dig it with a fork. My mom likes to do that. But I have to say, I'm kind of into the lemon press these days. because it's just so, there's like no lemon juice left behind kind of a thing, you know? All the juice from that lemon, if it's in there, comes out with a lemon juicer. Okay. Gonna just give that a little mix to get it started, and then we're gonna fold some chive in there. So now we're gonna just do a fine chop to our chives and throw those chives into the creme fraiche. Woo, I used to get in trouble for cutting chives wrong in the restaurant, okay? I have like PTSD chive cutting, I swear, because if there was like one chive that was off, my chef would come by and be like, throw them all out, start over. We're not really there right now. You're able to kind of just cut through these chives so that they're really, really small. They're gonna go into the creme fraiche, so if you got one piece that's a little bit larger, no one's gonna count, no one's gonna think about it. So we're gonna do some really beautiful cuts to these chives, but again, if there are larger pieces, that's okay. And also, I love talking about this when it comes to knife skills, okay? And you're cutting these distinct pieces of chive or lemon or fish or whatever it is. A, you want a sharp knife. Sharp knives are safer than dull knives. Dull knives, you're always kind of like digging into things, so you have to push harder. A knife should do its job by slicing through something with very little effort from your muscles. You have to practice. That's the only way. It's the only way that it happens, okay? Practice every single day, cutting some of your favorite vegetables, favorite fruits, favorite proteins, but you just have to practice. It's as simple as that. You can't really do much else. You aren't gonna wake up one day magically with perfect knife skills. You have to work at it. Okay, let's check the last batch of chips. They are working well in here. They're moving around. They look amazing. And again, we're looking for that bubble to kind of dissipate. As I'm moving the chips around with the slotted spatula, I'm making sure that they're not touching each other and all the chips have been separated. If you do find any chips that are not separating on their own by you moving it around with the slotted spatula, feel free to take that chip out of the oil, let it cool, separate it yourself, and then throw it back into the mix, okay? Okay, so we've got the chive creme fraiche with lemon and lemon juice. And then we're gonna get ready to plate this because our chips are almost done. I'm gonna give it a little taste. I'm not gonna add any salt to this. The caviar is very, very salty. We salted the chip. And really the creme fraiche is meant to be the sort of sour, fresh note that brings the caviar and the chip together. Perfect. And I've got my extra dill right here ready to go so that we have it for garnish of the chips. So you can see the chips are almost there. All of those bubbles are almost gone, so we can get ready to plate. Okay, we're gonna get ready to plate this deliciousness, and I'm gonna give you all of the options for the caviar. Okay, so let's get ready to just put a little bit of that creme fraiche into this bowl. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, I hear the chips. They are finishing. Now we've got these chips on here. We're gonna make a little room for the next ones coming out. So the last of the chips are out. We're gonna go back to that salting process where we're rubbing our pinched fingers of salt back and forth so that really sort of separates those salt particles so it falls evenly on top of the chips. And we're just, again, gonna sprinkle those chips with a little bit of that chopped dill. And then we're gonna get ready to plate. Let's talk caviar, okay? There's a lot of different factors that come into why we choose the caviar that we choose to go with this dish or really kind of any dish. I always think price is 100% a huge factor. What do we want to spend? What do we want to do? What are we trying to accomplish? So we've got 3 different styles of caviar. I've got a salmon roe, I've got a trout roe, and then I've got a really beautiful Russian ossetra coming from a sturgeon. Obviously the Russian sturgeon ossetra, that is the most expensive. If you're going to splurge this time of year, you go with a sturgeon. There's a lot of different varietals of sturgeon. We have ossetra here today. It's beautiful. There's kind of this walnut flavor to it, soft. It's a black caviar, beautiful sort of buttery walnut flavor, nutty flavor. So good. And sort of the top tier of the caviars that we have today. Then I would move into salmon caviar. Salmon caviar would actually be the second most expensive here. And salmon caviar is fantastic. It's got a great pop, high salinity, also a butteriness to it. There's a great butteriness to salmon caviar. And then you have trout roe. Trout roe, I think, is one of my favorite. It is my favorite of the inexpensive caviars because it's this very sort of subtle saltiness. And I like to say, if you are new at caviar and you want to explore, if you're new at roes, fish roes in general, and you want to explore, maybe go with the trout roe. I feel like the trout is sort of the beginner, that it's a fish egg that you can get behind because it's beautiful ocean saltiness with a super mild flavor, super mild flavor. So it depends on what you want to do, and it depends on what you want to spend. I've just given you 3 different examples of caviars that you have a difference in flavor and obviously a difference in price. You can also do all 3 if you want. Have all 3 on your platter and let people choose what they want, and they can sort of have an opportunity to taste a variance of fish roe. So we've got the caviars there, we've got the creme fraiche here, and now we're gonna just plate some chips. And the chips are just gonna go right into the center. So on your sheet tray, these were your salted Kennebec chips. We're just gonna throw those into the middle. So this is like the Feast of 7 fish equivalent to like your cheese board or your charcuterie board, something that you would put out while you're cooking in the kitchen, while your guests are arriving, while everyone's just kind of getting their jackets off and grabbing a drink, and they're so excited to see you, and they're so happy to be there for the holidays, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, there's just no regular cheese board this time. We've got homemade chips with an herb creme fraiche and a variety of caviar. And the thing is, it sounds really fancy, but it's so easy to make. And the other thing is too, there is always this, right? Like caviar is so precious. It really isn't. Like, let's just take a chip and sort of dip it right into the creme fraiche and then top it with some caviar and eating it. It's really just chips and dip. There's tiny little plates that people are just kind of scooping a little bit of creme fraiche onto their plate, you know, a couple of chips, a couple of scoops of caviar. I've got a salmon roe, and then we've got the trout. Oh, so beautiful. And then a little bit of the osetra. That goes right there. There's also an opportunity to maybe cut some bags so that people can kind of walk around with a little bag of potato chips. This actually is a bag that I just cut from these larger bags here. You kind of just cut off the top and open them up, put a couple of chips right into that bag just like that. Amazing. You can actually just put a little bit of creme fraiche right over the chips, right? Maybe even just a little bit of caviar that goes on top of that, and it's almost like a portable finger food as you're walking around. I will 100% take one of those chips out of the bag, but when you have chips and caviar, you just kind of take a little chip, smear a little caviar. So good. The natural salinity from those fish eggs, they're cured, so they're so beautifully salted. The creme fraiche is bright and refreshing, and it's that connector. It's the glue for the caviar to hang on to the chip. And these chips, I don't normally say this is the best of something, but these are some really good chips. This makes me a very happy Christmas Eve diner.